Professor Jason Hill. Would you like to say a few words? Talk about the courage to say the emet, to say the truth. This is Professor Jason Hill. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Sarah, thank you for having me here, and it's delightful to be here. I've been a staunch supporter of Israel for many, many years. I came to America at the age of 20 with $120 in my pocket as a legal immigrant, and worked my way up to become a college professor and got a PhD in philosophy. And my grandmother's father was a Sephardic Jew. He came to Jamaica by way of Portugal, and he married an East Indian woman and converted his children to Judaism. But it was very, very difficult for Jews to practice their religion in Jamaica. The British made it very, no offense to any English people here, but the British made it very difficult for the Jews to practice their religion. So my grandmother converted to Catholicism, so I was raised Catholic. But I have always had, as a child, a very, very deep respect for the Jewish people and for Jewish civilization, and have been writing in obscurity for many, many years about the exceptionalism of Jewish civilization, which, having studied several civilizations from about the age of 13, I was a very precocious child, I came to the conclusion that Jewish civilization was by far the most superior civilization that I had ever studied in my life, and that the Jewish people, having survived a diasporic existence for millennia, were an exceptionist people. And I found myself being a Zionist from as far back as the age of 13. And I remember writing in my second book, I wrote 3 academic books, and in my second book I remember writing that the Jewish people were what I called a post-human people. That is, they were the creators of time, because going back to Abraham, he had made this covenant with God. He had left Canaan and given up his tribe and his people, and had made this covenant with God. They had entered a new historic time, and that they were the creators of what I call metaphysical time. And in my new book, my last book, We Have Overcome, An Immigrant's Letter to the American People, I wrote not just a love letter to the American people, but I made a point of referencing how exceptional the Jewish people were, that no one ever gave the Jewish people an affirmative action visa wherever they went in the world to perform, and that part of what causes, in my view, so much of the anti-Semitism in the world is envy for Jewish success. It is what I call hatred of the good for being the good. That is, Jewish individuals, wherever they have gone, have made enormous contributions to Western civilization. Jewish civilization is an international treasure trove that has got to be protected, because Jewish civilization and Western civilization are inextricably linked. And in the article that I wrote that got me into a lot of trouble, I made the point that Prime Minister Netanyahu had every right to annex the West Bank. In a subsequent article that came out today, on Front Page magazine, I made a vehement call to Attorney General William Barr to outlaw Students for Justice in Palestine because of their connection to Hamas, to end all BDS movements, because all of these movements are linked, not because I'm a radical for the First Amendment, but because all of these movements are linked to terrorist organizations, because they they make Robespierre look like a kindergarten teacher because they invoke a Robespierrean reign of terror across university campuses because they shut down free speech. And I will not be silenced. I think that we are seeing a wave of anti-Semitism and a wave of anti-Jewishness across American campuses because, again, people hate the Jews because they are remarkably successful, because they are the benefactors of a great deal of good in the world. In my book, We Have Overcome, I also spell out very clearly that Jews are the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement, that the Jews made enormous contributions to the civil rights movement. And I went as far as saying that without Jewish money, let's just be very clear, the civil rights movement may never have gotten off the ground because you do need a lot of financial infrastructures to finance what started out as a moral movement. So I just want to say that, you know, there's nothing in this for me to gain because I was writing about this without attention, and I wrote this article, which was part of a 700-page book. That is an academic book on American foreign policy, 100 pages of which is devoted to Israel. My publisher is going to have a fit when he sees that 100 pages of this book is devoted to Israel. But I will not cut that chapter because it's very, very important. And I do think that we cannot, those of us who support Israel, those of us who support Jewish civilization, cannot be silenced. We cannot be muzzled. One of the things that really saddens me is the extent to which Jews like the Jewish Voices for Peace on my campus at DePaul, have turned vehemently against me and are siding with the Palestinian Students for Justice and are actually seeking the obliteration of the State of Israel. When I painstakingly point out that Article 7 of the Hamas Charter calls for a global caliphate, and that both the Palestinian Charter and the Charter of Hamas call for the obliteration of Jewry, not just from the region, but from the world, that there are Jews who say that it's time for Israel to be obliterated. This actually, as a non-Jew, actually breaks my heart. And I think that this is a serious issue, that the split in the Jewish community where Jews can actually be this divided is really, really serious, and that we can't give up, that somehow the Palestinians have appropriated the moral vocabularies, and it's time for us to reappropriate the moral vocabulary and to be ruthlessly intransigent, to be implacable in our moral right to claim Israel's right to exist, to stop thinking that to be Zionist is to be racist, that you can't claim a right to have a Jewish state and then sheepishly state, oh, but I'm not Zionist. I think I was speaking to someone today that's saying, like, I'm Jewish, but I don't like Shabbat, right? So I'm really, really happy to just have shared a couple of words with you today and to say that whatever part that I can do, there's nothing self-interested in this about me. I work from convictions, I work for my core values, I live for my principles. I am not someone who, I got into 25 law schools and I shed every single one of them. I got into 13 business schools and I ripped them, and I did a PhD in philosophy. So I've never been driven by money. So I'm an old-fashioned academic nerd. I'm a scholar and I'm an academic at heart who's driven by principles, by values, by ideas, and most and foremost, I am a moralist. I see the world in moral terms, and I see Israel first and foremost, as an ethical state. As I said in the article, as the only, and I use these words very carefully and I make no apologies for it, as the only beacon of light amidst a bunch of primitive, savage, barbaric, illiberal regimes. It is the only state in that dark continent that practices religious reciprocity, where LGBTQ people can seek sexual asylum, where Christians can go and seek to practice their faith without persecution. Israel is a treasure trove in that dark, illiberal, primitive part of the region, and we must continue to give our support, and we must continue to convince American Jews that it is in their rational self-interest. It is in their rational self-interest to support their ancestral homeland, and we must also convince non-Jews that Israel is America's alter ego in the Middle East. So I won't take up any more of your time. I'm just very, very grateful to have had this remarkable opportunity to address you all. And my work on behalf of Israel will continue. Look for more articles coming. I have an article in the American Thinker that is forthcoming in a couple of days. I have an open letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu that is forthcoming in about 2 weeks, which will be a very, very powerful letter to that stalwart, talking about the Golan Heights, talking about the 1967 war, talking about the formation of Israel from 1948, and linking him to the great prophets, Abram, Jacob, and Isaac. And it'll be a paean hymn to Israel and to, I think, what his role is, because I think he is probably the only person in that country that realizes the nefarious threat that Iran faces. When he goes to the UN, there are 3 words on that man's lips: Iran, 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 because he realizes the nefarious threat that Iran faces, and he realizes what a pernicious and racist institution that the United Nations has become towards Israel. So, thank you all very, very, very much for having me here. Thank you.